Mr. LaHood to inquire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the witnesses for being here today. Mr. Powell, I wanted to ask you a couple questions related to nuclear energy. As you may know, my home state of Illinois is home to 6 nuclear power plants, supporting over 5,900 jobs there and accounting for about over 50% of Illinois' electricity generation. However, several of these plants have had difficulty operating at a productive level over the years. And I've tried to focus here with a number of my colleagues on a variety of policies to prevent the premature retirement of the existing nuclear fleet, including the bipartisan bill that I'm a part of called the Nuclear Powers America Act. Can you talk briefly about the climate impacts of premature nuclear power plant retirements, how important it is to preserve this fleet to our nation's emission reduction objectives?
Absolutely. Well, first, Congressman LaHood, thank you for your leadership both on preserving the existing nuclear fleet and on scaling up new innovative clean technologies. Preserving America's nuclear fleet is absolutely vital. So nuclear powers about 20% of American electricity. That 20% comprises about 2/3 of our zero-emission energy. Nuclear power is definitively, today, the most important source of clean zero-emission energy in the United States and the most important part of our response to climate change. So finding ways to preserve that fleet is absolutely vital if we're at all serious about solving the climate challenge.
Thank you. And as you mentioned in your testimony, in some cases, existing tax credits have had the unintended consequences of creating market distortions that needlessly distress baseload clean assets like existing nuclear power. As we look to policy ideas focused on new generation, and you referenced the bill that Mr. Reed and I have put forth, the Energy Sector Innovation Credit, how should those policies be constructed to avoid these type of negative pricing events and consequences?
Absolutely. Well, if you take a look at what we've done with the wind production tax credit, which again has been very helpful in bringing down the cost and scaling up wind energy, the unwanted side effect is that we pay wind to generate regardless of whether the market wants that power or not. So an hour of wind generated in the middle of the night in the fall or the winter when energy prices are already very low or in fact even zero, the wind energy still generates. And because of that, it causes people to bid into the wholesale markets at negative power prices. Then other generators, nuclear plants, for example, that are optimal just running all the time, are forced to actually have to pay for the privilege of staying on the grid. So in that instance, our tax policy has been sort of incoherent from a climate perspective. We've paid one clean energy generating source and we're causing another clean energy generating source to pay for the privilege of generating. So that is why we've got to get out of this market distorting policy. What I really appreciate about the proposal that you and Congressman Reed have put forward is you're proposing to pay out the credit not based on how much someone generates, but how much the market pays for that generation. So it's paid out as a percentage of what the market compensates. So if the market really desires the power and it wants it at $100 a megawatt hour, it would pay out at, for example, 60% of that or $60 a megawatt hour. If the market doesn't want the power and values it at $0 in that megawatt hour, the incentive would pay out at $0 in that megawatt hour. And I think that that's a much wiser way to do this and to direct resources working with markets as opposed to against them.
Thank you. Mr. Halstead, in my last minute here, let me ask you a question. Nuclear is the nation's largest zero-carbon resource. Can you discuss the importance of nuclear to lowering carbon emissions and how your plan would ensure all energy sources will play a role in addressing this issue?
Thank you, Congressman. In solving our climate problem, we need an all-hands-on-deck solution, and I agree with my colleague, Mr. Powell, about the importance of nuclear power as a low-carbon, actually zero-carbon technology. Nothing would drive nuclear power and other clean technologies more than a significant carbon price, because that would clearly benefit all low-carbon and no-carbon technologies, which is why a company such as Exelon, one of the nuclear leaders in this country, is a founding member of the Climate Leadership Council. But a carbon price, to summarize, would help the nuclear industry and all zero-carbon emission technologies.
Thank you. Those are all my questions.